This
Recorded.
conference will now be recorded.
So just very quickly, we're going to go through a general overview of this session. So we're going to touch on a GoToMeeting overview, prize drawings, and we're going to go through the roll call before we get to the presentation. So just to GoToMeeting overview, please make sure you're on mute until the question and answer. If you're on the phone and you've called in, that means mute and unmute are *6. You'll have a little voice that tells you when you hit *6 whether you're going on mute or off of mute. For everyone, if you're not on mute and there's background noise, we will mute you. We would like to encourage you to please feel free to post questions in the chat as the presentation proceeds. Posted questions will be answered first during the Q&A, and then after that we will be opening it up for people to unmute themselves and ask questions that way as well. Just a note on the Q&A, a little bit different than our previous sessions. We're going to do Q&A until about 6:25, at which time we'll do the door prize drawing so that we can get that done prior to 6:30. But if there are still questions that haven't been addressed in the Q&A before the door prize, we will open up the Q&A after the door prize as well. We understand that there might be a lot of questions, so we are having a longer session tonight because of that, and we encourage participation. We know that not everybody will be able to stay longer than an hour, especially those who have other responsibilities, especially kids and everything, but as allowed, staff will stay on, and we encourage you, our audience, to stay on as well, as long as possible until the conversation is had. So with that, we just ask that you please be respectful of the presenters and the other participants as we go through this virtual session. So for those of you participating in the virtual session, you will be entered for an opportunity to win one of 3 door prizes that we're giving away tonight. The drawing will be not at the end of the session, but at 6:25, as I previously indicated. You must be present to win the door prize. However, if you're participating tonight and you can't stay till 6:30, just know that you will be entered. You will be given an entry into the open house grand prize drawing, which will be held on Earth Day on April 22nd. And that one you do not need to be present to win. And so as long as we have your contact information, which we're asking for here during our roll call, we will be able to contact you if you happen to win the prize. So for the roll call, what we're asking is that if you happen to be logged into the session through your computer, please send a message to the GoToMeeting organizers that includes your contact information so that we know that that you would like to be entered in the prize drawing, and we know that we can get a hold of you. If you have called in and you would like to be entered in the prize drawings, now is an opportunity to unmute yourself and introduce yourself. And then you can send your contact information to Melita Smart, our administration assistant. Her email address is dnrrecept@badriver-nsn.gov. You can also find it on our website if you didn't catch that. And so that's a way that we can get your contact information without you having to like announce it to the recording that's going on right now. So hopefully that was clear. So we just would like at this time, anybody that is on the phone would like to introduce themselves as a participant to please unmute yourself now using *6. There will also be another opportunity for a roll call later on after the presentation as well. But we do need your contact information if you want to win a prize. Otherwise, we want people to get a hold of you. And then also I would encourage, if for some reason you are declining the chance to win a prize, if you could let us know that as well. That's helpful. I know depending on if there's a person here from different agencies, sometimes, you know, they can't win a prizes there, or you might just not be interested. So just let us know that as well. So we have that information, know not to enter you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, this is Joe Bates, Bad River tribal member, and also a member of the Bad River Anishinaabe Environmental Protection Alliance, or NEPA, as a secretary reporter.
Great, thank you, Joe. Any other callers would like to introduce themselves? Okay, like I said, there's going to be another opportunity coming up. Oh,
this is Mary Lou Salawater, and I too am on the Environmental Protection Alliance. I'm a tribal elder. That's it.
Miigwech, Mary Lou. Sorry. So we'll just move on, and I would like to introduce Naomi Tillison, our director at the Mishkizebe Natural Resources Department.
Thanks, Jessica. And thanks to everyone who joined us. We're excited that you took the time out of your evening to join the Mishkizebe MNRD team. Tonight we'll be giving a presentation about the Enbridge Line 5 issues that we've been dealing with within the exterior boundaries of the Mishkizebe Reservation. We do have some additional information on our webpage that you can find at badriver-nsn, as in Native Sovereign Nation.gov. You should be able to find our natural resources page, and we do have a web page that's called Threats and Challenges. And on that page, you can find some additional information about pipelines within the Bad River Reservation, including additional details about Enbridge Line 5 issues. So I encourage you, if you haven't been there, to please visit our web page, and we do try to update it and post additional information as we're able to release that. So I'm excited to be here with the team, and you'll hear from many of the Mishkizebe Natural Resources staff tonight as we talk through this presentation and hopefully help answer some of the questions that you may have. On that note, I'm going to hand it over to our Deputy Director, Ben Connors Sr., for the next slide.
Anin, Junior Wagos Nina Janakas, Mashkazibeng and Dunjaba, the Gigni Duodam. Miigwech. I just wanted to echo what Naomi said. You know, I'm real excited that everybody come on here today. I'm glad that you guys are here. Okay, so the purpose of today's open house is to share information with the community about the tribe's efforts to address Enbridge Line 5 pipeline issues, while also seeking its removal from the Bad River Reservation. In upcoming presentations, you'll be given information on and be a part of the discussions on the following subjects. We got the Denemy Creek mainstream, and this is a location where the pipe is actually partially exposed. Pretty interesting photos to be shared here in the presentation about this. Next site you're going to hear about is a helicopter crash site and contamination associated with it. We're also going to hear about the Denemy Creek tributary site, also known as Slope 18. Slope 18 is a site where significant material loss resulted in the pipe being completely exposed. We're going to talk about anomaly digs tonight. These are locations associated with maintenance of the pipeline. And Along the lines, you're also going to hear about the unknown odor investigation associated with one of those dig sites. We're also going to discuss the polymat drop that Enbridge still has not cleaned up. Another big one we're going to talk about is the Bad River Meander site. And this is a location where the pipeline crosses the Bad River, and natural processes of the river are coming close to exposing the pipe completely. We can go to the next slide, Jess. Okay, this is just a real general image image for you all to see. As you can see on here, it shows that line 5 is almost 1,100 miles long. Begins at Superior, Wisconsin, ends in Sarnia, Ontario. Along the way, it crosses underneath the Mackinac Straits and countless other streams and rivers along its way through 4 of the 5 Great Lakes watersheds. Here in Bad River, we have 13 miles of this pipeline. It's just a little more than 1% of the total length. And within our boundaries, we have identified numerous dangerous situations regarding the pipeline. Of course, better details are going to be later on, so I'm not going to get into those, but I just wanted to mention that because I feel comfortable in saying that we here are better stewards of the land than our neighbors. And if we can easily identify within our little 13 miles of pipe here, where cover has already been completely removed or is in imminent danger of being uncovered, I can't help but wonder how many places along the remaining 1,085 miles are in the same state of disrepair. How many locations have never had any eyes on it? How many slope 18s are there? And Miigwech, that's all I got.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. On this slide, it shows the Schwamgen Bay area. And you can see that Enbridge Line 5, the current location is shown in red. You can also see the exterior boundaries of the Bad River Reservation is outlined in green. And we also outlined the Bad River watershed, as the reservation is located in the downstream third of the Bad River watershed. And within the Bad River watershed, there are 220 water resources, either within the Line 5 corridor itself or within 500 feet of the corridor. And this isn't counting the numerous small wetlands or smaller water resources that are on the landscape. Of these 220 mapped water resources, most of them are large wetlands. There are 7 that are lakes or ponds, and 17 are streams or rivers. Highlighted here are the major waterways within the Bad River watershed, and consequently the waterways threatened by the Enbridge Line 5 pipeline, including Denemy Creek, Mushkazee itself, or the Bad River, Sugarbush Creek, White River, Bear Trap Creek, the Kakagan Bad River Sloughs Complex, which is not only important locally, but it's important regionally and on an international scale. Also includes Schwamgen Bay and Lake Superior herself. And if you could advance to the next slide, Jess. As we put together today's presentation, we did summarize the number of access permits that our department has issued over the years for Enbridge or Enbridge's contractors. And this is a summary that shows the number of access permits issued since 2016. Sometimes the access permits issued are only issued for 1 day of access, and sometimes the access permits might cover a full week or a longer duration, depending on what the nature of the activity is. So this is a work in progress, but this summary does clearly show that there has been a significant increase in the number of access permits that our department has issued for Enbridge and their contractors since the Tribal Council decision making in 2017 to not renew easements that had expired. And since 2017, since that council decision making, we do make sure we're sending a representative from our department, whether it's a staff member or a contractor, out in the field when Enbridge or their contractors are out in the field. So as you can see, there has been a significant increase in activity on the reservation related to Enbridge issues in recent years. And you're going to hear a little bit more about some of those issues next. So I'm going to hand it off to Aurora Conley, our Land Records Intake Specialist, to go over the next slide.
Thanks, Naomi. Bonjour, my name is Aurora, and I'm just going to give a quick overview of the slide. These are specifically the sites of concern that we're discussing in this specific presentation. The following slides that are going to be presented to you relate specifically to these sites and these concerns / issues that we're focusing on in this presentation today. As you can see, the red goes across as the pipeline across the reservation. The more brown shaded area is Bad River with the boundary there. And we have the 4 pin drops on the specific sites that we're going to be looking at tonight. And each site will have a small presentation related to that site. So I think we're going to go on to the next slide and start presenting. Thank you.
This is Lori Salwater, and I'm talking about the Denemy Creek site. The Enbridge did in 2018. It was the beginning of June, and they did a depth of cover so that they could tell how deep the pipe was. And on June 21st of 2018, there was a rain event and we had known that the depth of cover was only about 10 inches. And with the rain event, we decided that we needed to go out and do some investigation. We went out there and we were able to see the pipe. It was just, there was a splotch. It was probably about 10 inches. It was black, and you could actually see the pipe and touch the pipe under probably 2 inches of water. And so we frequently visited up in the top on the right-hand side. That's the actual pipe being exposed, and the lining is, the outer coating is flaking off. You can actually see people touching the pipe through the water, and the water's not covering their hand. So we do go out there and check out when there is a rain event, just to check out the conditions of that area. Next.
Bonjour everyone, this is Abby Fergus. I'm the wildlife specialist, and a couple of times tonight I'll be sharing a little bit of what we've been learning as far as impacts to our Sinyag animals, and Jess is going to help me click through a couple trail camera videos that really speak for themselves and show just how many different relatives are using this as a corridor. In my experience with trail cameras, I've never seen such a density and richness of different species. So first we've got Maingan. You can tell it's Maingan with those long deer legs. And the way they're pawing at the water reminds me of my puppy Juniper from the res. Next we've got Wasagi Maingan coyote with shorter legs, and they're showing how they feel about Enbridge in line 5. And here's some more coyote footage playing around in the creek, which also reminds me of my puppy. And then we've got Gidiga Bijou, bobcat. Looks around, make sure no one saw them slip up on that ice. I'm forgetting a word for otter. Is it nigig, maybe?
a gig.
A gig. And finally, we've got a family of muckwog, the cub taking a drink. The other cub and the mama coming along. So yeah, a lot of us have been amazed by all of the creatures passing by on this specific trail camera. There's hardly any empty space for anyone who does camera trapping. A lot of times you get vegetation or water in the background. It's almost all wildlife, so keep an eye out because we're going to be sharing more of this footage with the community. Yeah, I guess that's what I've got for right now. Those videos kind of speak for themselves. Miigwech.
Bonjour, everyone. Andrew Spicala, Brownfield Specialist. Talking about the Enbridge helicopter crash. This helicopter crash occurred October 9th of 2018. And first and foremost, it did result tragically in the loss of life of the pilot of the aircraft. When the aircraft went down, it released jet fuel, oils, and other hazardous chemicals into the site of the crash. Proper protocols regarding the notification of this flyover did not occur at the time, and the remediation of the contaminated soil took place until September of this last year in 2020. You can see on the top right and bottom right pictures showing the oil booms deployed to contain any contaminated surface water and remediation work that was done leading up to September on the bottom right when the site was covered. Throughout the process of remediation, there were still pieces of aircraft and its gear being found, as you can see on the bottom left, that picture from August of last year. This site was and still is in a remote area of the reservation near Line 5, and access for remediation or other site visits has damaged the trails and access routes to this site. Since this incident took place until today, if Google isn't lying to me, 876 days have passed. Natural Resources staff or tribal monitors have accompanied Enbridge or their contractors to this site no less than 179 times, which Naomi kind of referenced a few slides ago, which averages out to about once every 5th day for almost 2.5 years. After the most recent soil sampling occurred in October, Enbridge requested closure of this site, and that request is being reviewed at this time. Next, please, Jess. At the helicopter crash site, the delineation of the wetlands nearby was done outside of the growing season, and no subsequent delineation took place. So at this time, there are still concerns on the exact mapping of the wetland resources in the area. The increase in human activity at this site may also have altered animal presence, and the damage that took place from vehicle and foot traffic to the site is only part of it, as plants like wintergreen, pictured there on the top right, that were present at the site, as well as multiple tree species seen in that lower picture there, were not only burned in the incident, but were affected by substances released from the helicopter.
Thank you, Andrew. So this is Jessica again. I'm going to be talking about the Denemy Creek tributary site, also referred to as Slope 18. This is a tributary to Denemy Creek main stem, which Abby talked about just before the helicopter crash site. The main issue at this location was that the pipeline was exposed and the exposure was discovered in August 2019 by MNRD staff. So you can see the exposure in that middle picture. So the exposure resulted in 40 feet of pipeline being unsupported, which meant that the entirety of the pipe of that section of pipe didn't have any dirt even underneath it. This was due to erosion in the area. This was a known problem site. There were geohazard surveys done by the company and their contractors at the site. That's how And then MNRD was keeping an eye on the site because it's actually a site that is walked by on the way to the helicopter crash site. However, the exposure might not have been found right away just due to the amount of brush and the fact that it was on the far side of the right of way from where people usually walked to get to the helicopter crash site. The site was fixed, we'll say, in quotations. The design is not holding up as it was intended, so there continues to be ongoing maintenance that shouldn't necessarily be needed if the design was encompassed all the environmental variables at that location. So there is a continued risk of the pipeline being re-exposed. We know that the site restoration is incomplete because some of the hydrological concerns, basically where does the water go, where does it come from, haven't been successfully addressed yet. So repair work, as I noted, is ongoing at this site. For some of the actions that MNRD has been involved in at this site, when we tried to count the number of access permits and site visits, we basically ended up with too many to count. There's been a lot of work, both accompanying Enbridge staff and their contractors to the site, and there's been a lot of independent work done by MNRD to understand what is going on at this site. There's been more than 5 proposals submitted by the company and reviewed by our department, with the result of 12 water-related permits being issued to allow for construction at the site. That included brushing the site, where the permit was issued in November 2018, but brushing didn't actually occur until after August 2019. 3 permits related to phase 1 of the project, which was to put sandbags under the unsupported section of pipe, and 8 for phase 2 of the projects, including 3 original proposals, 4 emergency approvals, and 1 final anti-degradation demonstration after the fact, where the work occurred prior to the decision being made by the tribal council. Additional actions that are ongoing are coordinating the hydrological restoration work that needs to occur at this site. I'm going to exit out of sharing the PowerPoint really quick and go to my web browser again, because we would like to share with you awesome story map that Susie Smith, our GIS specialist, put together for us about the pipeline issues at Slope 18 and the Dedemy Creek subwatershed. I'm not going to read this verbatim. I'm just going to kind of scroll through it. But I will note that this story map, in addition to other materials on our website, provide more detail about what's going on in the Dedemy Creek subwatershed and Slope 18, including giving a great geographic context for why some of these issues might not be unique to just Slope 18, and there might be and might be many more Slope 18s out there that, due to the remoteness of the pipeline in different locations spanning our region, just might not have been found yet. And I want to share that this story map will be something that will be linked on our website. So in addition to looking at other information, we encourage you to go to this story map and kind of scroll through it yourselves. There is a little bit of information on the helicopter crash site, which is shown as number 1 in that top left image. And then there's information about the exposure, and you can see those two things are really close together actually on the landscape. And it includes some maps showing the disruption of the historic water flow at the site. So that's what this map shows with a lot of those nice colors. And then there's more images too that really put into context what you see there. And just due to time constraints, we weren't able to include necessarily all the images and every single detail on the site that we would like to tonight. So bear with me while I switch back to the PowerPoint really quick. Well, that's okay. So next, I believe Edith will talk about some of the earthly gifts at Slope 18, Enemy Creek Trib.
Miigwech. Mewena Bojo, Migani Gabo Kwendish Nakazga Mixindo Dam, Shkispit Montpa. I work as the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. Everybody professionally knows me as Edith, but in the community, I'm Bardo. So the earthly gifts at Slope 18, Nibe water. It's an exceptional resource water recognized by the tribe as that. Awesinyug animals that are in the area, as we've seen on the videos that was showed before. This is another area, and I think, you know, our reservation has a lot of these areas where there is many different types of wildlife that is going on around there. Bear, ruffed grouse, blue jays, red squirrels, beaver, raccoon, bobcat. Every now and then we get a cougar running through. And a key, earth, remote site. Access trails have been damaged by traffic into the site. And that is not unusual because of the number of times that they've had to go and repair their poor ways of putting things together, I guess, their construction efforts. So it gives us a little indication as to, you know, how they manage these types of places, you know, when they're failing. They end up also damaging other places in the process. And we've seen that time and time again. Gitganates is the plants. The plants native to the area have been supplanted by the presence of riprap being placed on the slope. So as these places get repaired, not only are they damaged by the traffic that's coming and going in the area, or being dropped in the area, or being dropped by the area, or not even near the area from a helicopter, they are also being brought in all these other different substances, which, you know, we're not really sure where they actually came from, what borrow pit this riprap came from, if there was other non-local beings or what's also known as invasive species in that area that was brought in with this. So the monitoring that goes on afterwards on these sites is more extensive than what we, you know, it's not just coming in and fixing it. It's also watching to see, you know, what happens afterwards. And a lot of times what we've been recognizing is that their methods have failed. So they have to come in and try a new method or do something different. So, so the plants that were naturally growing in the area are no longer there. And how are we going to then restore that area? So first of all, we need to inspect of what was there to begin with, and then ensure that those areas are restored to our standards of what it should be. I'm pretty sure. And that's all I have on that. Miigwech. Back to you, Jess.
Thank you, Edith. And so next, I believe, is this Andrew? Or whoever is assigned to this one, please take it away. Pipeline anomaly digs.
Hi, my name is Eric Andrews. I'm going to talk about our anomaly digs. A number of years ago, the pipeline required maintenance that required an excavation of the ground to access the pipe directly to address points of interest for the pipeline. And after the dig itself, these sites needed to be monitored for quite a while in order to make sure nothing went wrong during this process. These were remote, hard to reach sites along the corridor that were, I believe, 2.5 miles from the road that had to be accessed on foot often. And after the work, there was a odor detected at one of the sites that was it was an unnatural odor and required further investigation. Since the initial excavations in 2019, every summer we were monitoring it on a near weekly basis, which required a significant amount of man hours and posed risks to both the monitors and the resources that we're looking to protect here. In addition, as part of this work, some timber matting was being carried in by helicopter, and Enbridge had what was known as an unexpected release, which was dropping these timber mats in an inaccessible site on the reservation, and these mats are still here, or still there. They have yet to be addressed in any meaningful capacity by Enbridge. And on top of their lack of response to this issue, it also speaks towards their lack of responsibility towards working with helicopters. This is a second accident to do with helicopters conducted by Enbridge within 2 years. And so we have to continue monitoring these sites, and especially one of the lower sites on the anomaly digs exists within a floodplain, and almost the entire time that I spent monitoring out there, that anomaly site was underwater. So if anything went wrong there, that would immediately be released into the water body. Next slide.
Thanks, Eric. This is Abby, the wildlife specialist again, and to follow up on what Eric just shared about these anomaly digs, I wanted to do some storytelling about all the animals and relatives we've seen out at this site too. So as Eric mentioned, these digs took place in a floodplain, which is created in part by an omic, or a beaver lodge at the base. And that creates an important wetland habitat that essentially every relative on the reservation relies on at some point in their lives, from Maingan to the frogs. And one thing that occurred at these dig sites was a mysterious odor was detected by our department, and we had to push Enbridge to shut down the pipeline and investigate what was going on. They unfortunately restarted the pipeline before we had any answers about that smell. But a chemical assay came back indicating different chemical smells, and that was in September. So as Eric mentioned, there's a lot of visits that were required at this site when precipitation events occurred, including during the winter if any snowmelt occurred. So I was one of the lucky department members who got to go do that 4-mile one-way snowshoe hike in the winter. And when I got to that spot where someone had detected the chemical odor in September, I stopped dead in my tracks and I thought to myself, oh no, I smell a really weird odor. But luckily at that point, I looked over to my left and I saw what is depicted here a little bit, which is Maingan or wolf estrus. And that's when the breeding female of a pack has some blood in her urine indicating that she's in heat and it's mating season. So above that picture of estrus, you can see Naguayab and Gimiwan. And Naguayab's that darker wolf. She's the breeding female of the Mashkazibing pack, and Gimiwan's the breeding male. So I found it very interesting, and we've been exploring like what it means that Naguayab left her estrus at that same exact spot where Enbridge had left their odor in September. And that's just one of many wildlife encounters our staff have had. Lots of us have just seen Mainganog in the distance while we're walking these pipelines. I believe on that same trip I saw that Gidiga Bijou, the bobcat, had left some tracks walking around on the berms that encompassed one of the digs. So this is kind of taught us how all these wildlife have grown accustomed to using Line 5 as a corridor itself. Maingan also has been known to den near some of these different Enbridge areas, which is a concern because Mainganog are territorial and spread well across the ceded territory, so it is a big deal if a pack gets disrupted enough that they need to go choose a new denning spot, and means that they're going somewhere less ideal, maybe further away from the water or their food source. And then, yeah, the slide also reflects some of the concerns for Nibi, Aki, and Gitiganans, including rare plants and unique stream and river features that are at risk.
Bonjour, everyone. My name is Melissa Eric. I'm the Water Resources Specialist, and I'd like to just share with you some information about what's happening at the meander site of Mashkizibi. So this is a very dynamic area, and just to sort of situate ourselves with the slide or with the images here, the larger picture here, I wish I knew who took it so I could have put a photo credit on there, but it's a really great photo. And it's looking from west to east at the meander. And if you look at the small aerial photo inset up on the top, so like where that meander, where it like widens out on the west side. So the picture is taken like standing there looking straight east along the line of the length of the pipeline, which is buried, of course, it's underneath. And so in that inset aerial photo, you can see the pathway of the pipeline. And another thing that I'd like to point out about that photograph or that aerial is all of the little oxbow lakes that are in that area, or they may have filled in by now and more like oxbow wetlands, but those oxbows are formed by this natural process of meandering. And the issue here is that those natural river processes that process of meandering is close to exposing the pipeline, or potentially close to exposing the pipeline. And so I can kind of walk you through that a little bit. So the threat here is as the river meanders because of the way the river flows and erodes the banks, and also flows overland and creates like overland channels that can then form a chute cutoff and cut off that landscape. And if you look in the inset on the top right, those little red marks, I'm sorry, it's kind of small, but those are some of the 4 areas of concern at the meander site. And so you can see where the neck kind of narrows. Overland channels are forming there because in times of flooding, which you'll see in the next slide, I believe, or one of the coming up slides, when the area floods, that water moves over the landscape and it's forming channels. And one way that these oxbow lakes occur is when basically there's a chute cut off after enough erosion eventually, and you can see that evidence of that all around that site. Eventually the water it finds its way. Water is going to it's going to take the easiest path. And so once a channel has been formed, when there's enough force, the water is going to just rush through there and cut that off. The danger is, you can see from that inset, if the water, it's not really if, it is just a matter of when. It will eventually happen. When that cutoff does happen, the water will be forcing its way perpendicular to the pipeline, and the depth of cover there is in some areas of that at the meander, it's as shallow as 5 feet. So that's the threat of pipeline exposure. As the river erodes the bank and continues these processes, those are the threats. And of course, exposure of the pipeline could lead to a large spill if it were to, create a rupture. And we know that water has a tremendous amount of force. So the pipeline is buried. It wasn't designed to withstand the force of spring floods and ice out and so on. So those are the concerns. And so the company has actually proposed a number of projects in this area. And some of those projects, well, as you can see on the right, it says we've reviewed 4 proposals now, and we have 3 additional ones in review. And a few of those projects, if you've been following the things that have been public noticed, one of those projects was a timber revetment. And if you look at the large photograph, so in the photograph, you're looking west to east, and of course the river is flowing from south to north, so basically from the right to the left. So that one of the projects was to place 425 trees along the bank in 2 layers along the bank on what you see on the right side, the bank of that, like what looks like an island, that's the meander. So that was one of the proposals, to place 425 trees there and cable them into the bank. And another proposal was to place about 3,600 cubic yards of aggregate and riprap along that same bank. And another proposal was to install a new length of pipeline through horizontal directional drilling. And that would be basically replacing that pipe that's there and putting in 1.5 miles of pipeline that's horizontal directionally drilled. So those are the kind of projects that we've been reviewing. And these projects have strong likelihood that they're not going to function as designed, and that ultimately, when they fail, they'll end up leaving a lot of detritus behind and a much more compromised situation at that meander site. And that work would just have very severe impacts on that landscape. So those are sort of the general concerns there. And those, like I said, we are reviewing 3 new projects. Oh, I'm sorry. And then there's one additional project is to place some turf reinforcement matting across the channel. And I don't know, Jess, if you can use your cursor to kind of show where that would be. But the idea there is just to kind of reinforce that channel with some turf reinforcement matting. And now we're actually reviewing a project that would place riprap along the length of that channel. And just to point out that that's only one channel of many, and there's one on the right that actually also of channels forming there when flooding happens. And so addressing only one channel, even if it were to work, wouldn't be addressing the problem because there are multiple channels there, as you'll see in a later slide. So I think Eric is going to take this. Well, so
sorry, I can take over if you like. So we just wanted to discuss here what it exactly is that we are trying to protect here. And for those of you that don't know, I'm the ornithology specialist, and something that immediately comes to mind to me is that if on top of the damage it would do to the sloughs and our monoman beds that are very critical to the way of life here, it occurs to me that we have an endangered species, the piping plover, that nests on our shores not too far from the mouth of the Bad River. And they spend the majority of their time in the tidal area, darting in and out of the waves. And if that water was contaminated, it would rob these birds of not only their food source, but also potentially coat them in contaminant that might prevent them from leaving or outright kill them. We have outstanding water resources here. These areas are relatively compared to other parts of the surrounding region, pristine, and some of the most, some of these areas apologies, sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. I guess just to summarize, I would say the opportunities we have here towards conservation of these gifts are magnificent compared to the surrounding regions. This is such a vital hotbed for these plants and animals that it is vital that they remain protected for the future generations. Next slide.
And that's over to me again. So he mentioned the next 7 generations, and I don't have a picture here because we don't have that picture of who that next 7 generations is, for one thing. Anishinaabe Ijitwawin means Anishinaabe culture. We're trying to find the word for culture, but it also, that word Ijitwawin also means our religion. And that's the best we can come up with, our way of doing things. This is what, as Anishinaabe, we have done here for who knows how long. And what is the cultural resource? It is our natural resources. That is what our cultural resources are. Our nibi, our awensinyak, benesiak, manidunsak. So awensinyak is our animals. All of those animals are part of creation. The nibi is part of creation. Benesiak is part of creation. Manidunsak, those insects are part of creation. And Gichimani du Gete Gitagan, that is the creator's garden. And if we know our language, you know, that tells us a lot about what we should value here. It's something that was gifted to us by the creator, that all of the plants and the shrubs and the grasses and the mitigung, the forest. There's a story for just about every one of those things in creation. For everything in creation, there is a story for. And in Anatig, right now, we are tapping that tree and taking the sap from it to make our maple syrup. It came at a time when we were starving to death. We were shown how to do that work to be able to survive. That's part of our history. Wiguasatig, that is our birch bark tree, our birch trees. We know that our birch tree we've used for our containers, for our travel, for our housing, for everything we needed to be able to protect us. Wiguasatig has helped us with. And Mitikomish, Wabe Mitikomish is that white oak. That is what makes our fires. And we can go on and on and on with all the trees and things that they do for us. These are our cultural resources, our natural resources. Gimama Kinan, those minerals that were once found on the surface here, those are what we were to use to help us, not what was in the earth. Gimama Kinan, our mother, the earth, that is who has provided, like every mother that we have, has provided us with everything that we need in life. That is what we need to protect here for the next 7 generations. And as we go forward, and you can go to the next slide. What is our concern as it pertains to the 7th generation? When it comes to creation, you know, and I've tried to decolonize my language, and instead of saying our environment, which we hear repeatedly over and over again, and it's becoming to have this negative connotation to it just by saying the word. So when I change it to creation, it becomes a different perspective, because that's something that was gifted to all of humanity, is what we find in creation. And how we take care of that is what we leave for the 7th generation. And 7 generations past, they left a treaty for us because they knew what was coming for us. They knew that we would need at some times to rely on the earth and all that she provides for us, and the waterways and all that provides for us. When we think about that 7th generation, what is our concern there? What are we leaving them? What is our concern if Nibi is contaminated with crude oil? What is our concern if deer are contaminated? We already see a chronic wasting disease that's happening with them. But if multiple things, cumulative things, happen to the deer, we may not see the deer at all. It's looking forward of what we are leaving for those who are not born yet. What is our concern if Manoomin is contaminated? You know, our wild rice. When we think about those things, just for a moment, think about what it would be like if we didn't taste that for a while. You know, that this is part of home. This is part of who we are as Anishinaabe. Those different things, the fish, the manoomin, the deer, the nibi, all of that is part of home. And when we don't have that, we end up losing who we are as Anishinaabe. So what is our concern if fish die because of contamination? How far could a pipeline oil breach travel? So to look at that is only to look at, you know, what recently happened in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I think the last map I had seen of where they had found oil in the sediment of that river was 41 miles away from the point of release. So that tells us a little bit about how that oil can travel in the sediment. And it doesn't always float on the top of the water. Different oil reacts different ways, and it reacts differently in salt water as it reacts differently in cold water. So, why is it that the council made the decision that they made? Because they are looking towards the 7th generation and what we are leaving them with. We weren't left with a pipeline from 7 generations prior to us. They didn't even think that something like that would happen to us. But here we are today dealing with this. And perhaps at the time that they permitted it to go through our reservation, our voice wasn't heard then. And if it was, it wasn't thought of as how it would affect that 7th generation down the road. So, excuse me, now that when we think about it, we can think about what it is we want to leave them. How, you know, 7 generations ago, they looked at us and they loved us before we were even born. And that same way of thinking, we need to move forward with. We need to love those people in the future who are coming behind us and leave them with something of value. So with that, when we think about what our concerns are about this pipeline and how it affects our cultural resources, we think about all of that, all of creation. So with that, I want to say miigwech. Yes.
Thank you, Edith. This is Melissa again, and I just wanted to present to you some thoughts about how are some ways that we might go forward? Like, what is the best way to protect the water and keep our community safe? And you know, this is the photo that I was referring to with the that shows. It's a beautiful photo of the flooding, thanks to courtesy of Joe Bates and his drone flights. Is the best way to protect the water by lining that bank with 425 trees or 3,600 cubic yards of riprap. That's like, if you think a truckload is about 10 cubic yards, it depends on the size of the truck, but that's a lot of riprap. Is the best way to protect this place and the people and the beings downstream by installing 1.5 miles of pipeline using horizontal directional drilling with the incredible impacts that would have in all of the access areas? And or is it to line that overland channel that you can see where it's narrowed, to put some more riprap? I think it's 335 cubic yards of riprap they're proposing for this one, or some turf reinforcement matting. Is that gonna do it? it's really hard to imagine that in this kind of a landscape, armoring with trees or riprap or turf are going to really provide any measure of protection. So the question really comes down to what are we trying to do here? Is our aim to protect the water and respect the sacredness of all life here and keep communities safe? Or is it to protect the flow of oil through an aging pipeline? So there is a way to protect communities and keep communities safe without further damaging the land. And of course, council has passed a resolution a couple of years ago and reaffirmed that resolution that the best way would be to remove the pipeline from the landscape. While the pipeline is here, we see this kind of flooding happening. How do we keep communities safe? How do we protect the waters while that pipeline is still in place? And that there is a way to do that and keep people safe without further damaging the land. And that is through robust and intensive monitoring and a protocol to shut down the line and purge the line when conditions require it. And many of the pieces that are required to do that are already in place. It's monitoring weather patterns, it's monitoring the flow rate, it's monitoring by monuments, and that's those 3 circles that you see. And there's the next slide will show that more closely. Those are monuments that are placed to show, to provide evidence of how far the bank is receding. We can monitor with cameras, with aerial patrols. And let's go to the next slide, please. So, like I said, there are a lot of this monitoring is already in place. There are multiple weather stations around the watershed that you can see. All those, you can't see them close up, but all of the spots on that map on the left are various weather stations. And by looking at like total precipitation in the last 24 hours, or National Weather Service has a 3 to 7 day hazards outlook. There are other prediction center forecasts. That's one piece of the monitoring. Another piece of the monitoring might be flow rate and discharge. And we have partnership with the U.S. Geological Survey on multiple stream gauges, including one that's on the Bad River at Elmhoist. And that graph that you see in the bottom right, I just pulled that from last July, from the 2016 flood. And I wanted to show that because it's a really good way of showing what these gauges can show you remotely. And that straight vertical line, that's when the discharge went from about 500 cubic feet per second to 40,000. And I remember when I heard that on the radio, I wasn't living here, and I thought that must be a mistake. That can't be right. And I looked at the USGS site, and so we can use these kinds of tools to see what's coming down the pike. And the monuments and cameras are another way. So in this picture of the monuments, you can see there's several series of these monuments, and they start at the bank and they go all the way to the pipeline at specific intervals. And that's a way of measuring, how much is that bank receding. And one of those groups of monuments shows that the channel has migrated about 7 feet between, I think it was fall of 2018 and spring of 2020. So by looking at that kind of thing, by looking at, the weather patterns, the flow, the rate of channel migration, people that are much smarter than me are able to, figure out how, like at what point, at what kind of a flood event can we expect to have how much channel migration. We can use this kind of monitoring to determine what's the critical or the minimum distance between, for example, the channel bank and the pipeline. Like how close is too close? In trying to determine when it's time to say we need to shut it down and purge it, we can determine like the critical or the minimum depth of cover over the pipeline where the overland channels are eroding. So One geohazard survey in 2020 showed that there was an estimated 5 feet depth of cover at the shallowest point over the pipeline at the meander. So, you know, if we can monitor these things, and we know at 6,000 cubic feet per second, which is what you get from that gauge at Elmhuyst, when you know that it's 6,000 cubic feet per second is when the river overtops the meander. You know, all of that kind of information can come together to determine, like, at what point, what's the trigger point when we need to say, okay, this is a dangerous situation. It's time to shut it down. It's time to purge it until that danger passes. Those are very real scenarios and alternatives. They're much less impactful than bringing in, oh, did I mention the 425 trees and the 3,600 cubic yards of riprap? That's all going to be brought in by helicopter. So, I mean, there's much less impactful, much more doable ways of protecting this area and all of the beings here than these proposals have been putting forth. So, you know, this is a safe, unimpactful alternative that can be put into place and put into action until that line can be decommissioned completely. So that shutdown and purge protocol is, you know, just something that is important for people to keep in mind, because it is an alternative to these proposed projects. And you know, it is already, you know, the pieces are already in place. So I'll leave it there. Thank you. Miigwech.
Miigwech, everyone, for all of the information that you presented. This is Jessica Strand, the environmental specialist again, and we're going to be doing our second roll call. We realized that we're a little bit behind on our schedule, having said that we were going to try to do the door prize drawing at 6:25, and we're only a couple minutes from 7 o'clock at this point. So we want to try to get this roll call done quickly so that we can do the door prize drawing. But basically, for those of you that might not have been on the call for roll call number 1, we are encouraging those of you that have logged in through your computer to send us your contact information to the GoToMeeting organizers using the chat feature. If you'd like to be entered to win either the door prize, which will be drawn tonight and you must be present to win, or to get an entry to win the grand prize for our open house series, which the prize drawing will be on April 22nd for. And then we do know that we have some participants that haven't logged in on their computers and are calling in. And at this time, there is an opportunity for those participants, if they haven't already done so and they're interested, to come off of mute, give us your name, and then you can follow up later with your contact information, and that can be done by sending it to Melita Smart, our admin assistant, at DNRRECEPT@badriver-nsn.gov. You can also find her email address on our website at badriver-nsn.gov as well, if you look at the natural resources page. So for those of you that have called in, here's your opportunity to introduce yourself if you'd like to be entered into the prize drawings. All right. Well, I'm not seeing anybody. And just a reminder, that's *6 to come off of mute. I do think we only have 2 callers left. And so I'm going to say that we're going to move on here. So we just need a little bit of time to compile that information and get our online prize wheel set up. So we're going to start with the question and answer and maybe do about 5 minutes of that, and then have the door prize drawing right at 7 o'clock. So I did notice that some questions did come through in the chat, and I'm sorry, it'll take me a second to scroll to those. So we got some positive feedback on the wildlife videos that Abby shared. And then Ben did pose a question, and I think it was is an effort to get people to think about things, but he posed the question, aren't these pipelines designed to have that lateral? Oh, and I'm sorry, Edith will be our facilitator tonight. Edith, sorry about that, didn't mean to talk over you. Do you want to facilitate for about 5 minutes, and then we'll do the prize drawing, please?
Sure. And so this is your Q&A time. And I was just rolling along with you there, Jess. So yeah, if anybody has any questions, just enter them into the chat box there, and we'll just pick them out here. We're getting a lot of people who are entering in on the chat box, their phone numbers that to the organizers, and also letting them know that there are that they are still on the call here for the drawing. Be our secretary, is that Samantha Kay? And no, it's Jay McPhee. When will the pipeline be shut down? So that is a great question. And we wish it was like tomorrow. That would be awesome. But is there someone within Natural Resources? Naomi, do you want to take that, or legal maybe?
Yeah, hi Edith. Related to that question, I really don't know the answer because of the litigation, so it would be best answered by our legal team who is not present tonight.
Okay. So yeah, you might have some questions that we might not be able to answer to. How does Enbridge decide which anomalies get fixed? That's also a very good question. We've been trying to figure that out ourselves. I've asked that question several times, and they still have yet to provide an answer to it. So apparently they have some magic box that they go into and say, oh, we'll fix these ones. I'm not sure. But they know that they needed to be fixed. How they say that, we don't know. What they tell us is that they're anomalies. We don't know what's there until we start digging into them. And which was kind of strange because they would pick different ones. Who is RC? Melita Smart is asking, who is RC?
Yeah, that's in case RC would like to be entered into the door prize drawing, which Melita and team are working on.
So yeah, if you could enter into the chat to Melita, she could probably get you entered in there if you want to be entered in. Mary Lou is asking, has anyone talked to Enbridge about shutting down during dangerous times? And I'm not sure. Oh, you mean like an emergency situation?
Hey, Edith.
Go ahead, Naomi.
Okay, sorry about that, Edith. Didn't mean to interrupt, but I can try to take a stab at answering Mary Lou's question. So I do know we have asked Enbridge to shut down the pipeline in a couple different situations. You know, we heard Abby reference the odor investigation that occurred after the 2019 anomaly digs were completed. So we did ask them to shut down the line. They did originally, but they restarted it before the investigation was done. So that's one example where we have asked them to shut down the line during dangerous times, because that wasn't known. And we still don't know a lot of the details of what really caused that. There's been other times where we have communicated and asked Enbridge to shut down the line during like high flow events. They don't often or typically comply with our requests to ask them to shut down during dangerous times. And then just to tie this back to what Melissa was sharing, you know, the importance of having that routine monitoring so we can keep an eye on what's going on at a site like the Meander, which is very remote and very hard to get to. So we've been implementing a variety of monitoring to try to help with that. And we've been trying to get Enbridge to develop a shutdown and purge protocol. So that way, when the river is within so many feet of the pipeline, they can proactively shut it down before that pipeline gets exposed. So we have made the request multiple times. I'm not aware of actually getting a shutdown and purge protocol from Enbridge.
Okay, so do we have any other questions? Going once. Oh, so what another question here is, if there were a leak, what would be the quickest time they could be on site? And I don't know if Andrew has any information on that.
So not Enbridge related, but we are actually in the works on having an emergency response training for not only natural resources, but others in the community as far as our response if there was a spill. But as far as Enbridge is concerned, I don't have any answers to that.
And this is Naomi to just supplement what Andrew said. I do think we have some additional details about Enbridge's response time. And I do apologize, I don't remember the details offhand, but that's something we could follow up on and get you a response, Luann.
Okay. So there is a couple other ones. Ben Connors put again, aren't these pipelines designed to have lateral pressure created by being buried and surrounded by soil? So wouldn't loss of that pressure weaken the pipe significantly? I would imagine so, but I'm not the expert on that. And I'm not sure if anybody is the expert on that here. I don't know if Naomi wants to say anything about that.
No, Edith, that's exactly what I was going to say. You know, we're really lucky to have such a great Mishkazebe Natural Resources team. We are not pipeline integrity experts, though. You know, our expertise lies in water, wildlife, or cultural, like in these other components. But the tribe has hired. We do have outside consultants who do have expertise in that area. And so I think Ben originally posted that question when we were going through the Slope 18 slides. And it was a big concern and still is because of Enbridge's design and implementation failures there, of having a pipeline that's not supported by soil. But again, I don't think I can specifically answer the details you're looking for, Ben.
Okay, so another question was, do they have remote shutdown capability? I'm not sure about that either. And I'm not sure we can answer that yet either. I would imagine they do because of the size of their lines and where they're at. But
Yep,
and
that's
other pipelines do have that.
Yep, Edith, that's true. They do have remote. They can shut it down remotely.
Has MNRD been presented a response plan from Enbridge? And do we have any equipment on hand that would be needed in case of a spill? Could we ask Enbridge to have materials here? Can you talk about potential issues from small leaks over a long period of time versus big leaks that are immediately obvious? And did I hear slope 18 continues to fail?
First, want to say McWitch for all the great questions. Really appreciate you guys participating and asking these questions. I don't know that we have the answers to all of them at the moment. I will say getting to the question that Joe asked about, has the Natural Resources Department been presenting a response plan from Enbridge? We did receive Enbridge's sort of broader emergency response plan. You know, something that's sort of that covers the full line. And we do have some details, but still are lacking quite a few details related to that response plan specific to the sites on the reservation. Andrew, do you want to help answer the equipment? Do we have equipment on hand?
We do, but that's just for small scale things. If the question, and I'm trying to find it myself here in the chat, if it's related to a large scale spill from the pipeline, and again, I'm not an expert in the subject matter, but I think the only response there would be to turn it off. But for small spills, we do have some equipment on hand and looking to get some more. So.
Question that was sent is, what does Enbridge say when Bad River reports a problem? Is an option a pipeline shutdown?
Yeah, so for that, this is Naomi again, for that specific question, I mean, it sort of depends on what we're reporting as a problem, and sort of depends on what time frame we're talking about too. But as I mentioned earlier, we have actually requested them to shut down line 5 on a couple different occasions, such as during the when that unnatural order was detected and we didn't know what it was. Also, we've asked when we've had some flooding conditions, high flow, we've asked them to shut it down. Also, they don't often actually do that, even though we are requesting it.
Yeah, and I know on other pipelines, there's it doesn't, you know, it's just not like our faucet where we turn it on and turn it off. Because of the amount of flow that's there, we're looking at 22,500 barrels per hour that flow through that at full capacity. Even half capacity, that's 11,250 barrels of oil that go through at 50% capacity. And if you look at that in gallons, that's 945,000 gallons that is going through in an hour at 50% capacity. So yeah, is it, or no, 472,500 gallons per hour at 50% capacity, 945,000 gallons of oil in an hour at 100% capacity of 540,000 barrels per day. So I kind of figured that through looking at what 540,000 breaks out to in 24-hour period. And then taking half of that and looking at what that breaks out to be. So what would we do to contain that amount of oil? You know, there would need to be, in just 1 hour, we would have to, at 50% capacity, look at containing 472,500 gallons of oil. So I think that we have all the chats in the chat box responded to. So if people want to take turns in unmuting themselves, I see that after that we will be opening it up for people to unmute themselves and ask questions. If you'd like to do that, we just ask that you be respectful of others and that they have that time frame. Go ahead, Jess.
Edith, sorry, really quick before we do that, I'm just going to do a check-in with Melita and find out if she's ready to do the prize drawing.
Hello. Jess, I have everybody's name down and my spreadsheet is up to date with their contact information.
Okay, would you be willing to share your screen for the,
Yep.
Okay. So I can, I'll make you a presenter, but just really quick, the prize drawing tonight is Begum Newman, birch bark basket, and plants used by the Great Lakes Ojibwe book.
Alrighty, can everybody see my screen?
Yes. Joe Bates, you are our winner.
Okay, we're trying for the second prize.
So
Mary
looks
Lou
like
Stillwater.
so Joe won the Begum Newman and Mary Lou won the birch bark basket, and now we're drawing for the book. It looks like Faye Madej won the Plants of the Great Lakes Ojibwe book. So we will be we'll be reaching out to the winners of the door prize drawing via email or phone, and following up with them on how they can pick those up. So thank you, and we're going to then and thank you, Melita, for organizing that. We're going to jump back to the Q&A.
Yeah,
Yes, we had.
Sorry, Edith, this is Naomi. I was wondering, I feel like there's maybe a couple of questions that came in before this last one that maybe we could just touch on real quick. I don't know if we addressed the question about, can you talk about potential issues from small leaks over a long period of time versus big leaks that are immediately obvious? And so I guess I just want to take the moment to encourage folks that haven't read Bad River's complaint against Enbridge to let them know that is available on the tribe's webpage. If you go to that threats and challenges webpage, you'll be able to actually see the complaint, which then contains a lot of information about spills that have occurred on line 5. And I appreciate this question because we're not just concerned about those big leaks, but there can be a lot of damage caused and concern over small leaks that happen over a large period of time. So I wanted to say that much.
So new question came in here. Does Enbridge issue public notice when they have leaks to the tribal community? And I know we haven't received public notice from them, but I don't know if they even did that in the places where they had huge leaks or you know, very noticeable leaks. It was until later on that where they couldn't avoid telling the community that they issued a notice that it was happening. And how do you say congrats in Ojibwe, Moen? I'm not sure. I think I would say Isa. So with that, Naomi, do you know if they ever issued a public notice to the tribe at any time? I don't recall it for anything.
I don't recall it or haven't come across it. I did want to mention, you know, we did talk about how they do have remote shutoff capabilities. I did want to mention that, you know, line 5 has different valves along it. And there are no valves within the reservation boundaries. They're on either side of the reservation. And why that's important is if there is a leak or spill and they have to shut down the pipeline, there's still all that oil that will be in the line in between wherever a leak is happening and the valve, I can't remember the full name of the valve stations.
Right, 13 miles of oil in a pipeline is still there. RC to organizers, does Bad River have their own spill reporting requirements? PHMSA has minimum spill quantities for reporting to smaller spills. So smaller spills can legally go unreported.
Hey, Andrew, would you be able to respond to that? Do you want to talk about the tribe's ordinance, the chapter 380?
Yeah, so we have our own codes that are set up, not specifically just for oil spills, but for any chemicals or hazardous substances that can or oftentimes do get released onto the reservation. And it's so going back to the couple slides I had about the Enbridge helicopter crash, those codes were implemented there to determine the types of fuel that were spilled at that area. And as far as remediating the site, we had to get those levels low enough where they weren't detectable anymore. So again, if it's a specifically for oil spill, sorry, I'm trying to bring up the chat. I don't know if I heard PHMSA was mentioned. That's a much larger scale than what we're dealing with. But yeah, we do have those codes in place for hazardous substances on the reservation.
The next question we have in it is, have you heard anything about using line 5 as a storage line? Should it get closed at the straits? I haven't heard anything about that. I don't know if anybody else has.
This is Naomi. I haven't heard anything about that. I'm not sure if anyone else has.
But these are great questions. And actually, when we respond to some of their requests for things, you know, we can ask these questions as well, on how they would reply to this. So, seeing no others posting in the chat box, if people want to ask a question by unmuting themselves, if they're on the phone, they can unmute by pushing *6 and mute themselves by doing the same, *6. Or if they're online here, they can actually hit the unmute yourself on your mic if you want to ask a question. So we'll give a little bit of time here. And no response to that? Are we seeing no response to that? Are we going to the next slide there?
Hey, Edith, can I I see that there was a question about where is the process for the potential reroute, and I'm not sure if we might have missed.
Oh yes, we did miss that one. Where's the process for the potential reroute?
So I don't know who wants to take, I mean, Edith, I don't know if you want to answer it. Oh, Jess?
Sure, I can try to tackle this one and others can fill in the gaps. Right now, where the reroute is at is it's under review both by the Wisconsin DNR and the Army Corps of Engineers, because it requires, at least for the water impacts for the reroute, it requires permitting from both the feds and the state. Part of what the state is doing right now is an environmental impact statement, or EIS, and that is currently being drafted. There is no hard and fast deadline for when that EIS will be completed. So it's really kind of hard to say where exactly in the process it is, but the reroute location has been established by the company and the data has been submitted to the DNR. And I would encourage you that if you're interested, just Google Enbridge Line 5 Wisconsin DNR. It will bring you to a informational page that the Wisconsin DNR has up, and you can actually go in and access the information that the company has submitted so far. So if you're interested, I would go there, and I believe there might be a listserv that you can sign up for, so that you get notifications from the DNR if status of different things change. But right now, as far as we are aware, there isn't necessarily any public comment periods open either on the federal level or the state level related to the reroute.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more.
I do see one more question. It was, did the government of Michigan shut down Line 5? Not sure who would like to tackle that one.
I'm not sure either.
I kind of have an answer. I think the answer is multiple times, but it hasn't stuck. So
Yeah.
I do think that there has been a lot of back and forth in the courts about what Michigan is doing related to Line 5. But I believe right now the oil is flowing.
This is Philomena. There's ongoing, litigation. The so the state of Michigan filed a case in state court related to shutting the pipeline down and stopping the pipeline from flowing in its current location on the Straits of Mackinac, where it's, I mean, the pipeline there is secured by like ropes, and so it's very dangerous situation for for anybody who has a connection to that Straits area, and the Enbridge responded by filing a separate action in federal court, arguing that the state has no jurisdiction over the operation of its pipeline, regardless of whether there was, an allowance for the pipeline to operate there in 1953 when it was built. And so, I think the state filed a motion to get that federal action remanded to state court. There's a separate thing going on in Michigan, though. There's a completely separate process related to Enbridge's filing of a application to dig a hole under the lake, dig a tunnel under the lake and stick its pipeline through that. And I believe the state permitting agency approved that application. There still has to be an application or permission provided by the Army Corps of Engineers for that project. But if that permit for the tunnel is approved and that tunnel project is approved, then whatever's happening in state court over that kind of overland, where it's like underwater but it's on top of the banks, that would obviously be affected. My understanding is that the state of Michigan has given Enbridge until sometime in May to stop pumping oil through that Straits area. I don't suspect that the company will agree to that, and will honor the state's demand to stop pumping oil. And then, the other thing that I'm personally concerned about is just information that I haven't been able to confirm about whether, whether the company would cease using Line 5 if it can't use the Straits, because, up to the Straits, it could just use the pipeline to store oil. And oil storage is also something that they need. They need not only transportation, but they also need storage. And so I don't think, I'm just concerned about, even if Michigan wins, um, there could still be serious problems that we're dealing with on the western side.
Okay. So one other, I'd like to see a method to detect if Enbridge is leaking anywhere along the route. That would be a first. So far it is section by section. Yeah, that would be telling as well. Great comment there, John. So, not seeing any more. If anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask a question, they can do that. Thermal imaging, Joe says. Yeah, That's a different way of doing things too. I don't know if you can see under the ground though with thermal imaging, it's on the surface only. So any other questions? It's about 7:30 right now, and I know some of our staff's children are getting restless, wanting to get ready for bed. Heat detection underground. Oh yeah, that's heat detection underground. I'm not sure how that would work. That's something something to think about. So with that, I think if we don't have any more questions, I'm not, shall we go to the next slide? Oh, and chi miigwech. With that, we'd like to say miigwech to everyone who participated in this. And since we have a recording of this, it will help us in looking at the questions you provided to us and being able to transfer those over to our any type of discussions we have with the Army Corps or Wisconsin DNR or whatever on the reroute process, but also on the purge and shutdown for line 5 through the reservation. And I'd like to say miigwech to everyone. Naomi or Ben, would you like to say a few words in closing?
Hey, Edith. I just want to echo what you said, is just miigwech for everyone joining us. Thank you for the Michigan ZB Natural Resources team for pulling this presentation together. Really appreciate it. Ben, you want the last word?
Well, if you're calling me out, I guess I'm going to say, yeah, I do. No, again, it's just going to be echoing. I was really impressed with the presentation tonight. Everybody did a great job. You could tell they did a lot of hard work to put this together, and yeah, I loved it.
Okay, with that, we'll say miigwech, mi'il, which means that's it. If again, our other resources are out there, people can look at those or contact us at our offices. All righty. Miigwech, everybody. Have a good evening.
Miigwech, good night.
Good night.